Good morning and welcome to the City of Rapid City Planning Commission meeting for August 6, 2020. If any member of the audience wishes to speak to an item on the Planning Commission agenda, there are speaker request forms on the table inside the door. Please fill out the request with the agenda item of the number you wish to speak to, or the number of the item you wish to speak to, and hand it to the staff seated on the left of the dais. At this time, we would also like to ask that if any member of the audience has a cell phone or other electronic device, that you either turn it off or turn the ringer to silent. If you need to take a call, please step out to the hallway so the meeting is not disrupted. Items 1 and 2 have been placed on the consent calendar today and may be approved as a group. Action will be taken on all consent items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent calendar by any planning commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration at this time. The findings of this planning commission are recommendations to the city council. The city council will make the final decision. Any items that staff would like removed, 1 or 2?
No, thank you.
Any items that a planning commissioner would like removed? And are there any items 1 or 2 that any audience member would like removed? Chair would then entertain a motion to approve items 1 and 2 in accordance with staff's recommendation. Rachel made the motion and Karen seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3.
Good morning. Item number 3 is 20UR014, a conditional use permit to allow child care center at property located at 4703 South Canyon Road. Property is developed with a church building, and aerial shows the building and the parking lot, and it's located within a residential neighborhood. Everything in the area is zoned low-density residential district. Child care center is a conditional use in the low-density residential district, and future land use is low-density neighborhood. South Canyon Road is identified as a principal arterial street, gets a lot more traffic. Here we have a site plan showing the existing structure located on the property. The applicant isn't proposing any expansion of the building or the parking lot. The proposed child care center would provide care for up to 125 children ages 2 to 13 years old with 12 to 15 employees, and the hours of operation being Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. They do have the indoor play area required, as well as identifying an outdoor play area which would be accessed from the interior of the building. One of the concerns we had was that the outdoor play area being located along South Canyon Road, which is, as I said, a principal arterial street. Our city traffic engineer has reviewed this application and has indicated that the play area is set back from the road, exceeds the minimum distance required to have a play area out in the front yard, so it shouldn't have any impact, and it meets the setback for outdoor play area, which is 25 feet from the property line. Separation is about 57 feet from the edge of the road. We have had calls with concern regarding traffic. The 125 children will generate 99 peak hour trips, which is under the threshold for a traffic impact study. So that was not required as part of this application. Let's see. Here we have, looking at the front of the building, there is an existing pole sign which they'll probably reuse for signage. Looking to the west along South Canyon Road, directly across the street, and to the east along South Canyon Road. And then this is looking at the adjacent neighbor to the east and the vegetation that's in place. And then this is the first driveway on that east side of the property, and then the drop-off area is to the back. So people will come in, drop off, and then drive around the building to the exit on the other side. So going in this direction, most likely, in order to get through the site. So this is a unique reuse of the building. As I noted, the conditional, or the child care center is a conditional use permit in the district. The proposed play area meets the minimum setback requirement, exceeds the minimum clear zone requirement for a 35-mile-per-hour road. And it will provide a service in a predominantly residential area of the city. So staff's recommendation is approval with the stipulations noted in the staff report. The applicant is available for questions, and the city's traffic engineer is also here to answer any questions regarding traffic. So are there any questions for staff at this time?
Thanks, Fletcher. I've got several speaker requests, but anything for Fletcher now? Kelly? Or Eric, sorry. I saw you reaching. Eric Hikus, you can go first.
It's more of a general comment, Mr. Chair. I can wait until the other speakers.
Okay.
Yep.
Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What would be, I guess, the minimum threshold for a traffic study? I mean, I know there's a minimum requirement to do that. 99 drop-offs at peak. Would they make an exception to that, to look at that? I mean, it's a main street. I have 4 kids in daycare, and I can't think of any of them that were on a main arterial street with that much traffic. So I was just curious as to if they'd ever make an exception for a traffic study, or if they looked into any kind of parameters for that amount of drop-offs.
I'll have the city's traffic engineer answer the question regarding the traffic impact study. But we do have other child care centers that are along busier streets, such as Campbell Street. Don't know that we have any child or outdoor play areas which are in the front of the building. But as I noted, we did take a look at this, and it is set back 25 feet and meets the distance that it would have to be from a street to make sure it's safe. And it will be enclosed with a wood privacy fence and access from the inside of the building.
Sure. It looks like a 35-foot setback, if I'm reading that correctly. One other question, is the drop-off point directional, as in they can only come through that south or that east end and they exit on the west? Is that how it's designed?
I'd have to defer to the applicant on how they're going to design it, but.
Okay. I guess the reason for that question is, you know, if you've got 30 parents showing up at once and that's the only access point, you have 2 egress points on the other side, you might have a bottleneck of traffic building up, and envisioning cars stacked up on South Canyon is a little concerning, you know, during rush hour.
Steve?
Hi, Steve Fruman, City Traffic Engineer. The city criteria in our Public Works Design Criteria Manual that allows us to require a traffic impact study for a commercial use are 100 peak hour trips or more. The one thing that we would look at if there were a traffic impact study for this site would be the driveways, and would there be a requirement for turn lane into the site on South Canyon Road. The level of traffic on South Canyon Road, the addition of traffic from this use, especially considering that daycare is going to generally, pull from residents in an area who are already using the roads to get to work or whatever they do during the day that requires them, to need daycare service. Wouldn't anticipate any real impacts to the intersections in the area as far as 44th and South Canyon. An increase in delay for drivers there. Really, the only thing we would look at if there were a traffic study on this would be, is there going to be queuing at the entrances, so that, for this to work, the applicant would need to restripe South Canyon Road to take the parking off and add either a left turn lane in or a right turn lane in, so that if there is that bottleneck, you can pull vehicles out of the through lane, put them in a turn lane where they're less likely to get rear-ended. That really would be the only thing that traffic impact study would need to look at.
Thank you. John?
Excuse me, how is the 99 number, how did you arrive at that? It seems really close to 100.
The method for taking that, basically, there is an organization, it's the Institute of Transportation Engineers, the ITE, and they have a big book of basically counts of trips generated by different land uses and come up with either average rates or regression formulas for linking a particular aspect of the site. In this case, we used the number of children at the daycare and calculating based on, empirical data collected across the United States, how many trips are anticipated. So there is some, uncertainty,
What's your margin of error in this study?
I do not off the top of my head.
Even if it's one,
know.
then
But in this case, yeah, we used the number of students, 125, and put it through the formula, and it's, anticipated 99 AM peak hour trips, which includes the entering and exiting. Each vehicle going through the driveway, regardless of direction, counts as a trip.
including staff and everybody?
Yes.
I don't know. All right, thanks.
Rachel?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Sorry, Mr. Fruman, I have a question for you, too.
Okay, I'll just stay.
You're very popular. So I understand that the speed limit for this area is 35 miles per hour.
Yes.
But I used to live on West Chicago, which turns into South Canyon. And I know that a lot of people don't go 35 miles per hour on that road. So I was wondering if off the top of your head, if you know what the clear zone requirement is for, say, an area that's 50 miles per hour? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, now the clear zone requirements, once you reach a high enough speed, interstate sort of speeds, it's kind of as much space as you can get. But at 50 miles an hour, it's going to be around 28 to 32 feet. Basically, the idea being that a driver who starts going off the road should be able to regain control of their vehicle in that amount of space.
Okay, and then, and those clear zone requirements, those aren't from right away, those are edge of traveled way, aren't they?
Edge of travel way, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
All right, Eric, if you want to go now, or I can take speaker requests, your choice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have some concerns about the site plan, some similar to Kelly's, the stacking, the fact that many of the stalls would be backing up into those active lanes of circulation, and then the two approaches on the, I guess, the left side of the site are pretty close together. Typically, you try to separate those by 150 feet or so for safety, but so it just seems a bit the adaptive reuse of this space. There is really no dedicated loading or unloading, and I think that I share Kelly's comments about you're going to have a peak volume point where a number of children are being dropped off at the same time. I think it might take some fresh looks on this site. So I'm just sharing my comments, so. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, we'll go now to the speaker request. I have one from Kathy Labor. If you'd like to approach the microphone. Once you're up there, just identify your name and address so we have it on the recording, and we'll go from there.
My name is Kathy Labor, and I live at the property of 4640 Capitol Street, which is the property that had the lilac bushes on the corner next to the church. I've lived there for 30 years, and I want to ask you to please do not consider passing this permit. One of the things that people do not take into consideration, with the building being as high as it is in the back, which is basically in the residents' backyards because it's so close, the sound from the back of that building is amplified into our yards. Believe it or not, when someone holds a conversation just at the back door, we can hear every word in our yards. I've had issues over the years. Even though the church was only operating 1 day a week, they were having fruit sales there once a month. I have had to chase semi-trucks out of there that were parking overnight, running their refrigeration units. I've had to ask RVs that decided to camp back there. And when they had sales and on their Saturday church services, the car doors, they sound like a car is actually in our yard. And I don't know that anyone has really understood that impact. That's probably minimal. The biggest concern I have is the traffic pattern. I am retired now. I spend a lot of time out in my yard. And I have to tell you, approximately twice a week, I hear a car come down the road and slam on their brakes and screech. There are children, not as much as animals. It's a heavy deer population area also. So the sound is a big concern of mine. Yesterday, for example, I've never seen this before. When the garbage truck came to dump their dumpster, he backed out of the east driveway, which I thought was extremely dangerous because that is such a blind driveway. I'm sure you all know a few years ago there was a child killed on the west side of their driveway, and it's because it's very hard to see as they come down the hill. It's a flat spot and then they go down the hill. It's very difficult to see. People typically are driving much faster than the 35 mile an hour. While I was working, to pull out on Capitol Street anytime from 7 a.m. to about 8:30 a.m., there was sometimes a 10-minute wait just to pull out of Capitol Street. And right now, of course, with the bridge being out up at Nemo and with COVID and the school situation, the traffic is much lighter, but that's not going to last for long. Every day when I leave my house to pull out of Capitol, just normal traffic, I typically wait for a couple of cars to come through there. Traffic starts coming through there at 6 a.m. in the morning, and it's heavy till almost 9 o'clock. I'm very concerned about the backup of the traffic coming and going. The east entrance is narrow. It would almost have to be a one-way traffic pattern. But I've thought about this, and I just want to ask you, would you like to have 100 cars driving through your backyard twice a day at peak travel times. I'm trying not to get emotional about it, but it's a huge concern for mine. It's a safety issue. There have been problems with snow removal on that property, piling. They don't have any place to put their snow. They tend to pile it up towards the entrance that then it melts and it runs down the sidewalk right along Nemo Road there, which is a danger. The property is zoned residential. It's a very quiet neighborhood, and I just would hate to see a precedent set of a business being allowed there at this time, especially with the traffic that I think will just increase on Nemo Road as the years go. I think that basically covers it. There's just one other issue that I had while the church was there. And at one point, they put up a huge area light in the back of the church. And all of the residents behind there complained. After a few months, they did finally take it down. But then they decided they would put up these spotlights on the back of the building. And they were powerful enough that they shone into the windows in the back of my house. I felt that my privacy had been extremely invaded, and I tried working with them. I offered to put up motion detectors to get those lights off at night, and finally the lights burnt out and they just have not replaced them. So if you would please consider the residents that live there, our quiet style of life, and what an impact this is going to have on our lives there. I would really appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Excuse me, sorry, my voice is going. Greg Palmer? Step up to the microphone.
One more. Keep going. It was the one where, the one more somewhere in there.
They're all my slides.
Yeah, it was, there is a sign, a little red sign. No, keep going. Oh, there it is right there. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you. My name is Greg Palmer. I live at 4638 South Canyon Road, which is directly across the street from the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Asked on the speaker sheet if I was in opposition or if I was for the approval, and I am for the approval with an understanding. For 30 and a half years, I have lived there, and I will try to be very quick. Also, I want to say, if there are any representatives here from Seventh-day Adventist or from the proposed daycare center, I am excited, truly excited about having a daycare center over there, because it could be a number of different things. And I thought, when I first heard this, I thought this is not bad. I do have several concerns. In my 30 and a half years, I have worked with 3 chief of police and 3 mayors to get the traffic under control on 46 on South Canyon Road. As Kathy had mentioned, and we had not talked before, but as Kathy had mentioned, they do not go 35 miles an hour. They go 35, 40, 45. And my concern is, and has always been, that the traffic on this street is, and again, is a major street, is not controlled very well. And the only way you ever get anybody out there to control it is if A, there is a problem, or B, you scream loud enough, And then they send somebody out for a day or two, and then they're gone. One of the biggest problems that I think we have, one of my most serious concerns, deals with children in the front yard of this facility. I know kids, I know grandkids, I've had kids, I have kids, and it's hard to keep them contained sometimes. But beyond that, and as it was mentioned, the bottleneck, the way that it's designed, coming in the east and going out the west, I will guarantee you, if this is a pattern that is not just a random drop-off, but a pretty well-structured drop-off time, you will get backup. And the reason I know that is because, again, on Saturday, when traffic is probably 25% of what it is on a Wednesday morning, for example, it backs up as they turn in to the parking lot for the church. The problem that comes from that is dual. Number one, you have the backup, and to avoid the backup, what people do is pass in the parking lane. They just get into the illegal lane along the curb and pass. I have had, in the 30 years, I have been rear-ended twice for simply trying to drive into my driveway because I turned to the right, and because I slow down, even with the blinker, they think I'm turning left into the church and not my driveway, and I've been hit twice. And that concerns me. The reason that I guess it was mentioned also by the previous speaker that the traffic has been really bad. It has lightened up recently only because this has become a major throughway for tandem side dump trucks. Before, we had to deal with concrete trucks, we had to deal with lumber trucks, those kinds of things. Excuse me, but that hasn't been so bad. But then the logging industry really picked up. So the loggers come down there, and they start hitting their dynamic brakes about a block before to slow down from 50 to hopefully get down to somewhere near 40 by the time they come in front of my house. On top of that, when they opened up the mine near Nemo, we now have these dual trailers coming down full of crushed rock. And again, with the dynamic brakes, they begin to slow down when they come to the hill. In the slide that you have there, you'll see that there is a slight bend there. And it's a straightaway coming out of the canyon till that bend. And that's where that car is, that's where they really start to begin to slow down to get close to 35. I travel this road 4 or 5 times a day. And it is rare that I find anybody going 35. It is even incredibly rare to find somebody going under 30. I talked to a policeman some years back, and he said, you know, really what it is we give them 5 mile an hour for equipment differences, and we give them 5 mile an hour for not paying attention. That's 45 mile an hour in a residential zone. Now that has 100 plus kids. That concerns me, as Mr. Arguelles said, that concerns me a lot. I will finish up with this. In addition to passing on the right in the parking lane, in addition to the heavy truck traffic that has weighed so much that it's destroyed a Pennington County bridge that's now destroying the road in front of my house, with the speed that they're coming down, there is no way. If there is a child that happens to wander out there, there is absolutely no way that truck, cars can't even stop. I don't know, I'm not a traffic engineer and I don't know the numbers, but you take a dual side load truck, 2 trailers full of gravel, they're not stopping for a long time. So that worries me. If you look on this, there are 2 things I want to point out. Number 1, as the previous speaker spoke, you will see just to the right of that, left of that car, there's a little white looking thing. Those are flowers, plastic flowers. And there's a cross there. And that cross is for Chris Evans, who in July of 2005 died because, and that person who hit him was driving 35, it was determined. That person, that young 14-year-old kid died on that street. It's been 15 years. It's still tough for me because I held him while he died. I rubbed his temple because it was the only place on his body where I could not see damage. And I kept telling him it was going to be all right. And I knew full well this kid was going to die. And he died on the street. And that's why that cross is there. And that's why I am here. If you look to the right, you will see a utility pole. And there's a little sign there. You really can't see it, but it says, "Drive like your kids live here." And that was put up by the neighbor on the corner. That was after a Suburban took out a young lady who was mowing the grass in that boulevard, knocked her 15 feet in the air, multiple fractures in her leg, split her kneecap completely in half, threw her headphones over my house and 30 to 40 yards beyond. They estimate he was going at 60 miles an hour. He took out that utility pole, he took out 2 of my hedges, he went through 4 yards, and it was only after he took out a mature tree and came within 5 feet of taking out a garage did it finally stop. That's a Suburban at 60. Take that by a dual side dump truck at 40 or 45. It's going to go beyond what this kid did. So that's what I'm concerned about. Again, I don't want to leave here with the feeling that I do not want this to happen. I think it'd be fine in the neighborhood. The problem I have is the traffic, both the speed and also now having heard, I did not know that it was going to come in on the east and out on the west. There is no way, again, if a normal traffic pattern, there is absolutely no way you're not going to have a backup on that street. You have a backup on that street, you not only have the children who are in the playground later in the day that I'm concerned about the parents and the children in the vehicles trying to cross that lane of traffic to go into that parking lot. The traffic that comes down there is fast. It cannot, for whatever reason, it will not be controlled, and that is a concern of mine. After this young lady it absolutely is a miracle she wasn't killed. After that accident, I won't call it an accident, after that incident, for 2 days or maybe 3 days, I saw a police presence, and now it's gone. And the traffic is back to 40, 45 mile an hour. And with that, I guess I thank you again for the opportunity to talk. I'm a little bit like Kathy. I get a little emotional about this. I have never heard a death rattle. And ladies and gentlemen, I never want to hear another death rattle. I never want to see another child die in front of my house. And that's why I'm here. I feel that if I did not voice my thoughts on this, if something, God forbid, should ever happen, I don't want to say to myself, I should have said something. I have said something. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Kelly, do you have a question for Mr. Palmer?
No, it was just based on one of the slides, and the slide answered my question, so we're good.
Okay.
Thank you for your words. Appreciate it.
Thank you, pleasure also for.
All right, next speaker, Carla Steele.
Good morning. I'm Carla Steele. I live at 4650 Capitol Street, so my property borders behind them. My husband and I, he is retired. I now work from home. My office window faces my backyard, and as Kathy mentioned, the way the sound tunnels down that little canyon there, I've never experienced it. They were working on the building yesterday, and I could hear the man's cell phone conversation in the middle of my yard. It's one of those phenomenon things that the noise just travels that direction. And I have to agree, the traffic situation there is already sometimes incredibly congested. When I was going to work every day at 7:15, there's times I would have to wait for 12, 15 cars to go by before I could pull right with the flow of traffic to go to work. I can't imagine adding more traffic to that area. And if there is a car parked by that red house right next to that church, if you're coming down that hill, you see neither one of those driveways. It is absolutely blind until you clear that little flat landing. So if somebody's turning that into that property, there's no way anybody coming down that hill has time to stop. It's, again, it's one of those funky phenomenons that it is a blind spot right there. And having those kids in that front yard, I agree. I cannot, it's just kind of a silly thing to do, especially after that accident that happened just a couple months ago with that Suburban. That was an unbelievable one as it was. My other problem is, this is a residential neighborhood, 125 kids, 100 parents dropping off, picking up twice a day. That's 325 people. That's a commercial business. That's no longer a low-density type scenario. And I hate to see an empty building. I've never spoken against anything before. But I just don't really feel that this is the right fit for this. And personally, when I'm working at home now, and I'm probably going to be at home now for forever, I don't want to listen to those kids all day long and try to do my job. I love kids, I have grandkids, but I think if I lived next to you and if I had 100 of my kids as friends dropped off every single day to hang out in my yard all day long, and I realize they'll be inside the building part of the day, I get that. I don't think you would like me as a neighbor. I don't think you should have to tolerate it. I'm not saying they're not nice people, but I didn't buy that house there so I could be next to basically a school. I bought that house because it's a nice, quiet area. Half the people are retired, the other half are young families, but it's quiet, it's peaceful, and that's why we live there. And putting, in my opinion, what a commercial business is in the middle of that, you're now taking away what I thought I had. And that's, in my opinion, infringing on what I wanted and intended to have when I bought my property. And from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., we're talking 12 hours a day. And again, that's not a low residential, that is a commercial business. And I just don't feel that it fits there. And the traffic on that hill and that street is, you've probably driven it. You should come watch it sometime because it is nonstop and it's fast. And that's without the kids back in school. Hopefully our kids are going back to school soon, and you're going to add those teenage drivers coming down Nemo Road and the houses up above us going to school, and that just is going to even increase the risk, I think, in my opinion. And I feel bad speaking out against somebody that's trying to start a business and whatnot, but I honestly do not want that business in my backyard. Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan Zenz.
Good morning. When we looked at this site, we really thought, this looks
Can you
like...
identify yourself first?
My name is
Just-
Ryan Zenz, and I'm the applicant. We looked at the site, we thought it was a great facility, and we looked at, the inside, the outside, and with 24 years experience, we look at a lot of things. We look at, what's around it, that kind of thing. Is there homes? Are there children that are going to be there? Is it going to be useful in the area? And we knew that it would. I think now part of this is there's probably a silver lining to this as well, that maybe the traffic pattern will be studied or looked at for these residents too. I still believe that we've worked hard to fit the criteria in our application to apply for this. So we've made every step possible or in every process to fit the criteria to apply for the conditional use permit. And I think maybe that we have. It sounds like the biggest issue, one of the biggest issues is definitely traffic, for sure, and kiddos out in the yard. And we can look at those things and rework those if we need to. Looking at the number of kids in the facility, we don't want to make it a big, giant commercial facility. We want it to have that home feel still. And the outside of that facility has that, kind of look type thing. But kiddos are going to be inside, they'll be doing lunch, they'll have classrooms, things like that. So they won't all be outside at once. There won't be 125 for sure out on the playground. There may be 10, there may be, but we can rework where the playground's at or what we do for those things too. Those are just other options that we could do. I don't know if there's any other questions or things along those lines that you might have. I do know that as far as the drop-off area, Kent Kennedy is the architect that has been working on this, and I believe that he has them coming in up at the top by the red house, not down below. So I just wanted to make sure that I put that out there as well. He could not be here this morning, so.
Any questions for Mr. Zenz from the Vince?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Ryan, got a couple of questions because it's, and again, I know you did some work to get this plan together and worked with the city on the concerns. You've indicated that you still had, or you still might make some changes to the playground. Whether you have the playground right now, is that going to be fenced in?
It would be completely fenced with the appropriate height, and it would be wooden.
And you're considering now, I understand that you're also considering to have it a one-way in on the east side of that property?
I believe that is what he has there. Kent is not here, but I believe that that's what he has.
Have you reviewed the traffic pattern with the city? We've indicated, several of the, or at least one of the neighbors indicated that there are people passing on the parking lanes, and what are your thoughts about that?
That does draw concern. I would be concerned as well. When I looked at it, we look at traffic and things along those lines. We look at the marketing standpoint, and we also look at safety, yes. Now, when I've been there, all of the times that I have been there in the last few months, I've not seen that happen. But I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Right. It could happen. And it could happen at certain times. It could be when in the morning, with kids going to school, I don't know. But during all of the times that I've been there, I haven't seen it.
So have you had any conversation with the previous owners of the property?
Yes.
Have they spoken about any of these concerns that were brought up today by by the neighbors?
The pastor has not, no.
He never indicated that there were ever any issues like this?
No, not to me.
Okay, thank you.
Haven?
Yes, I've lived on Nemo Road for a long time, so I'm familiar with the traffic issues on South Canyon. One of the questions I guess I have for you is, the plan is for kids up to, I think, age 13. Right. What would the policy be for those kids walking home?
No child is allowed to exit the facility without a parent signed out. So they have to be signed out by a parent and signed in by a staff.
So even the older kids wouldn't have the option of walking home?
No. And all children would be, if we call it contained in the facility the entire time. All doors would be secure with in the outside of the facility with cameras and security monitoring to ensure the safety of everybody.
Ryan, looks like you have
Yeah.
something joining you.
Hi, my name is Alfred. I'm also one of the applicants. We're business partners. One thing that concerns me is if sound or noise is an issue with the neighborhood, and I'm saying if it's not. The pastor told us that on Wednesdays nights it becomes for youth to practice, and in each of those rooms, if you went to the basement of the church, there are like seven classrooms, and each of those classrooms have piano, and teenagers come on Wednesday at nights and starts to play and practice, and the pastor told us when we tried to deal with him and negotiate, he never said about concerns of neighborhood complaining of the noise. So I would think that inside the basement, because when we plan to operate, we're just going to start on the basement level first, and hopefully we'll be able to accommodate 125, because there's like, in the west side, there are only how many daycares in there? There are only 2, and the wait list for each daycare is like 100. The west side alone, what's Layoma's place? West Side Daycare has 175 wait list for kids. And so we're thinking if we could open up, we'll be able to decongest one of these facilities. And they are also a heavy, how many loads do they have? They can cater to more than 100. They can also cater to more than 100 with a wait list of 175. My point is that the church does not only operate also on Sundays. They operate on nights for the youth activity programs. They also operate on, I think they also operate on Saturdays, because sometimes the pastor said that they go in there. And I heard that it was supposed to be bought by the members of the church, for the teenagers, to make it less like they're looking for a funding for a non-government project as a youth program where they could do their activities and stuff. But then eventually the church council decided to sell that one, and we thought it would be a good idea to establish a daycare in there, thinking that helping also with the community need for like more of the daycare stuff.
I think there might be a few more questions for the applicants. Eric Hikas, do you have one?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brian, good morning.
Good morning.
Could you maybe show us, like on the site plan, how the drop-off and circulation would work? Is that something that,
Sure.
I think it would help some people understand what the intent is? It would help me. Thank you.
So you're saying they'd come in here?
Yes.
Thank you, Fletcher. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Rachel?
Yeah, I feel really conflicted on this one because I did live, in West Chicago, and I had small children, and it was one of the biggest reasons why I didn't want to live there, because it's such a dangerous street simply because it is residential. So I'm conflicted too, because there's parking along that street, people pull in and out of their driveways. You should be able to pull into a parking lot and pull out of a parking lot in a 35-mile-an-hour zone. But at the same time, it is dangerous in some of those areas. But more than just the traffic, which I think, I don't know how to do the traffic engineer's job, and I don't know how to do a police job. I'm not trying to comment on their jobs, but at the same time, there certainly is at least the perception of danger there, just simply doing things that you're supposed to be able to do on that road. But my biggest concern here, and I don't want to, prevent you from opening your daycare, because I actually think the location is a good location for this. But my biggest concern is that play area in the front yard. We never had our kids out in the front yard, except just to get into the car and out of the car. It was just, and we were further, east into town a little bit more. Is there any possibility of, I know the rest of the lot is actually just asphalt, but is there any possibility to have a play yard in the back rather than the front?
There's a possibility to rework it so that we can, we're open to ideas or that kind of thing. We can look at it again and place a fence that is higher so that it does deaden the zone, the sound and that kind of thing. Because we want to be courteous of the neighbors because we understand that they've lived there a long time too. So.
Fletcher, would you be able to, maybe the two of you could kind of draw on this site plan where the play area currently is supposed to be? Is that possible for you guys, please?
That's generally where it is. A little bit further.
Right there.
There's only access to this playground from the building, so it would come from the door. It does set back quite a ways from the street as well, so.
Yeah, and I think you guys will probably do a really good job of controlling where the children are, and they'll probably stay in the fence. I'm more concerned about the cars potentially getting in there. I mean, there was that child killed, as has been mentioned, and I can only imagine if 20 children were out, at that time. But okay, thank you. That answers my questions.
All right, John.
Even if you come in from the east, you're still going to have stacking on Canyon trying to turn left. So it's a screwed up mess is what it is. I make a motion that we require a traffic study and readdress this at a later date once we see the results and what the plan is for that road.
Okay, John made a motion to require a traffic study to consider this application, basically. So a continuation would be part of that. I'd look for some help from staff on maybe how that would be correctly worded.
If you get a second on the motion, then I'll require that, or request that you can put a specific date on that continuance, because to secure a traffic impact study takes a significant amount of time. I would say probably about 60 days, so we probably want to continue it at least a month.
That's probably a good suggestion, Vicki. Is there a second to John's motion? That was Eric Ottenbacher, seconded that motion.
So that would put it out to September 10th, Planning Commission meeting.
Okay.
And so what you're instructing the applicant to do is to secure a traffic impact study, to submit that for the city's traffic engineer to review, to see whether or not they've addressed traffic concerns generated by the use. Is that correct?
John?
Yes.
That work for you, Eric? Okay. Discussion on the motion, Karen?
Thank you. Number one, I think that daycares within neighborhoods is the right thing to do, because that's what parents want to do, is drop their kids off somewhere close. They don't want to drive across town to do that. So the idea of a daycare is great. I know also that there's been churches that have added daycares to their facilities, and every place that ever has a daycare, the neighbors don't want the kids in the neighborhood or in the yards because of the noise. That's a given. I think for me, the idea of the traffic impact study to address the speed, but mostly to address the in and out of the property and the site triangles or the site blockages to get in and out. In addition, I know that there's some thoughts that the applicants had about changing the location of the play area or doing things like that. I'd like to see that included as far as when you come back in September, to show other ideas that might come about because of the site that it's there. Just looking at it and looking at the right side of the entrance, I don't know if that's the east side, I would guess, but it looks like that's drop-off area, and that whole area right through there is really tight. Where the other side, where there's all those open areas for parking, that to me seems it would be easier to drop off because there's more circulation through there, and I don't know if that's part of the deal, and I would have to really think about that, but I'd just like to see some other ideas that come forward at the same time, and I don't know if that needs to be part of the motion or not, but I guess that's a question to the staff. Do I need to include that in the motion to have them bring back additional ideas, or is that just a given that they would do that?
Friendly amendment.
Mr. Chair?
Vicki?
So I think that once we get if a traffic impact study is required and the applicant chooses to do it, because remember these things typically at a minimum are $10,000. So this isn't something that he probably is even aware of the cost. But the recommendation from that traffic engineer is what we need to go with. And the scope of it, we will have them coordinate with our traffic engineer. As Steve mentioned earlier, there are other intersections that would need to be analyzed to see how they're queuing as a result of this increase in traffic that are down the road a ways. So I think that just a part of a general traffic impact study, we'll get the scope of it, that we would want to identify that if a traffic impact study is required, it's coordinated with the city's traffic engineer to determine the scope of the project. Does that address what you were commenting to, Karen?
That's the traffic impact part of it, yes. I guess my question is, if I want to see some other ideas from the applicant on the site layout, should that be part of the motion?
Oh, my apologies.
That's all right.
Absolutely. The motion maker would want to amend his motion to include that it be continued for 30 days to allow the applicant to submit a traffic impact study and to revise the site plan to address redesign of the site to compensate for the neighborhood concerns that were identified today.
Okay. And some of the things like putting the play area to the back, that's not going to help the neighbors and their noise at all. So I'm not necessarily looking for the play area. I'm looking at the traffic within that site and to see if there's a way to do that. And that's more than a traffic impact study would do. And so it's a combination, I think.
Right. We've got child care centers in commercial strip malls, and they've got play areas in the back next to the alley, and they're fenced and the access is only from the interior of the building. In those cases, the drop-off zone is the parking spot in front of the strip mall. I anticipate that they will come in that west approach, circle around, and then all those parking spaces on that east side, they'll pull in, and those kids will get out at that spot. So there won't be any stacking issues on the site anymore for anyone using it for a church purpose. So we probably have one of the better drop-off zones for a child care at this location than we typically see. Especially those that we've allowed in commercial areas. We have a child care center on 5th Street, close to Floorman. I don't know if that's the exact intersection. And then there's another one on Catherine Boulevard, which is a very large daycare, and it's got significantly higher traffic volumes, but it is set back quite a ways. I think the comments about the traffic today and having the traffic impact study to look at turning movements, as John has identified. The screening fence on the front of the playground area, the applicant has indicated he's willing to provide a privacy fence It's required to be 5 foot, potentially a 6 foot privacy fence, and maybe even some landscaping along the perimeter. The noise, certainly the neighborhood comments about the noise is something that anything the applicant can mitigate that is something that they should be considering.
Okay. I guess, I hate to have them pay $10,000 for a traffic impact
Or
study.
more.
Or more. If we're concerned with other issues, and if there's a way to do that without that cost, I mean, if there's a way to figure out a way that would be safer, because the traffic is going to go, unless you change the speed, it's still going to go 45 miles an hour. I mean, it's just the way things go. So it's not the speed, it's more the in and out and I don't know if that's part of a traffic impact study or not. I guess I'm trying to focus on that spot more than I am anything else, so.
Mr. Chair, and they'll look at traffic coming out of this area too, off the subject property, to see if there needs to be a turn lane in the approach itself, so that stacking isn't an issue that would cause congestion on site as well as in Canyon Lake, or South Canyon.
Okay. Well, I encourage at least the addition to the site plan in the motion, if the motion maker wants to amend that a little.
John?
Okay, we want to add traffic on the site?
A traffic impact study and revise the site plan to address
Flow.
mitigating the concerns identified by the neighborhood.
Well, the other reason, when you're coming from the east, you got the passenger side on the wrong side of the car. So the kids are going to have to go between cars at that loading area in front of theirs to get to where they're going. So
Mr. Chair, those cars are going to pull into those parking spaces, and the children will be unloaded from a parking space. That will be the loading and unloading areas, all those parking spaces beside the building.
which is even worse, because then they're going to be running between parked cars over to the building. I don't know, I just think it's a bad plan altogether. But anyway.
Well, and, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
that is important. We certainly don't want the applicant to come back with the traffic impact study and then have other issues on the site that the Planning Commission is going to continue the item anyway. So, and certainly a traffic impact study doesn't guarantee that he's going to get approval, but it's something that we need to acknowledge so the applicant proceeds knowing full well that there's no guarantee that it's going to get approved with this revision and this additional information.
Is there any way the city would create a school zone for that area, which would slow down all the traffic, and the fines are way heavier? I knew it, I read your mind.
Yeah, this is a relatively small child care center compared to several we have around the city. I don't believe that we've created school zones for them, but that would be a question for Public Works to look at to see if that's something that could be considered.
Haven, do you have comments on the motion on the floor?
I do. For Vicky, maybe, just to clarify, did you indicate that the traffic study would cost about $10,000, and that would be an obligation of the applicant?
Yes. And I don't mean to identify what the number amount's going to be, but this is a fairly small scope, but traffic impact studies typically cost tens of thousands of dollars. So I was just going at the low end, but I don't know what a traffic engineer would charge for that. It takes a lot of time, and it's a lot of work to do a traffic impact study.
And one of the factors in the death of that young child several years ago was cars parked on which would be the south or the west side of South Canyon Road. Is that still allowed, street parking on the road in that location? Because that's what happened in that case. The child darted out between two parked cars, and yes, there is a visibility problem.
Yes, I believe we still have parking allowed both sides of South Canyon Road along there. You know, that, like I said earlier, that would be that would be the main thing that the traffic impact study would look at, would be removing that on-street parking so that the space could be used as a turn lane.
And I think that would be very important.
The other thing, of course, is that 2005, he was trying to cross from the south side of South Canyon Road to the north side. He was crossing at Belmont. The Public Works Department, we have been getting for a while now requests for additional marked crosswalks across South Canyon. We actually have a project now to put a crossing in to the east of this site at the next street over, Capitol Street. That's beginning the design phase right now to put ramps and a crosswalk at Capitol for a second crossing of South Canyon west of 44th, because right now there's the school crossing over at San Marco to the west of here. So that'll be a second crossing there. But yes, that parked vehicle was a factor, and the parking is still allowed, I believe. Certainly that's something else to look at, is just generally should that parking be removed, even without putting in a turn lane. We could look at that.
Vince?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I have a question, if I may. You talked about crosswalks. Why isn't there a crosswalk right now at that west end of the parking lot there, going across to, South Canyon?
Well, legally there is, whether there's markings or not, because there's the street there. Part of it is that we won't put in a marked crosswalk anymore unless there's an ADA compliant ramp at both ends. There is not one there. And given the history, given the site distances, we were debating between Belmont and Capitol as where to build the ramps and put it in. Determined that Capitol would be a little bit better. Gives you a little bit more direct access also to the elementary school to the southwest. So.
Well, I'm looking at the cost, of course, and I'm definitely concerned about the safety of anyone, from children to seniors. But, if 15 years ago there was, horrible incident there, and it hasn't been answered yet. And yes, we have an applicant who's trying to start a business. So I'm concerned if we, and maybe this is for staff, not you, but if this went to Public Works to start a school zone, and we could put up crosswalks there for added safety concerns, maybe that would alleviate the us having to go forward or wait till September after an impact study that the applicant. So I guess I'm asking for protocol. If would it be, and if I can get an answer from staff on that. Would it be better just to wait to see if Public Works can designate that a school zone?
It isn't going to address the concerns about the bottleneck aspect of people waiting to turn in and out. I honestly don't know if a daycare even qualifies as a school for purposes of the school zone, which is a requirement of state law and city ordinance.
All right, thank you.
So I'm not sure.
All right, motion on the floor is still to require a traffic impact study and consider the on-site circulation and design. Rachel, comment?
Yeah, my comments are actually about the motion. I am absolutely, completely opposed to requiring a traffic impact study. I think we do have these regression formulas, which are based on statistics. It's the best prediction that we can get of it's going to cause 96 peak hour, and it doesn't meet the requirements. It is a huge expense. And then in addition to that, it's, the question is, can they even get an engineering firm to conduct a traffic impact study in the next month? I mean, I think that's highly unlikely. And the result is either they find out that no changes need to be made, and there's, however much money that costs to the applicant, or the other result is that they find that they need a turning lane, which then they still need to actually provide that turning lane, and so that's an additional expense. I just don't think that it's necessary. I think it's above and beyond. And I have some more questions for Mr. Fruman. If it's all right, Mr. Chair, if you could kind of give us an idea of what happens during a traffic impact study, all the steps and the processes that have to be followed.
Okay, so once the scope of the traffic impact study is determined, which would basically be negotiation between Public Works and Planning Department and the applicant's engineer on what intersections we'd be looking at, what the area is, then they're going to have to collect data. Obviously, the city, we collect our own volume counts on South Canyon Road. I actually also have speed data for that one from 2019. But the different intersections, we don't have turning movement counts as far as how many people are turning left or right from each intersection. We don't have that sort of data, so they would have to collect that. Also, they would have to make a prediction on the direction of traffic to and from the site, as far as assuming that during the peak hour you have that 99 vehicles entering and exiting. Well, how many of them are coming from the west? How many of them are coming from the east? That is going to be a little bit of something that they'll generate. You take all that, put it into an analysis using existing count data and then projected count data for a future year, or projected volumes on South Canyon and the other streets in the area that are included in the scope, current and future volume projections, to analyze the amount of delay that drivers are going to experience, the number of vehicles expected to stack up at each intersection being addressed in the study, and then if they exceed what the city's standards consider or define as the acceptable amount of delay, then what are the recommendations for modifications to the streets that would be needed in order to change that, or to bring that delay back above the acceptable levels. There's also a bit of a safety analysis where you would look at, they would take the last 3 or 5 years of crash data and consider, are there any trends that there's a consistent sort of crash happening, and what would need to be, what are any recommendations to mitigate that?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. I really appreciate that. I also I want to talk about the fact that this is a residential neighborhood. Sorry, thank you, Mr. Freeman. So as I've already mentioned, I lived on this street, and I think any of the other people who've lived on this street know that children walk to school on the sidewalk on this street. I've seen kindergartners walk to school on the sidewalk on this street. People pull in and out of their driveways on this street. people park on the side of the road on the street and take their kids out of their car because they live here. This is a residential neighborhood. And I do think it's appropriate to have a daycare in a residential neighborhood. My only concern is the location of the playground. But the idea that it's too dangerous for someone to drive into a parking spot and take their kids out of the car. I guess they can't go to Safeway, they can't go to the library, they can't go anywhere because how else do you get your kids out of your car? You know, sure, this road is dangerous, but at the same time, I mean, you know, we have plenty of daycares and plenty of other locations that are also dangerous, and we haven't posed this big of a, you know, roadblock to it. I'm absolutely not in favor of the motion, but I would be in favor of continuing to September 10th to see a revised site plan and just clarifications on how people are getting in and out of the parking lot and the flow of traffic through the parking lot. So I don't know if I could make a substitute motion. Instead of the current motion, I would like to make a motion to continue it to the September 10th meeting so that we can see a revised site plan, including alternative locations for the playground that take it out of the front yard, and then also indications of how the traffic would flow into and out of the parking lot. So that is my motion.
Okay, I'm not a parliamentarian, but I think this is in order if we get a second. All right, Vince seconded that motion, so we have a substitute motion now on the floor. Since we're getting pretty far afield, I'm going to restrict comments to the substitute motion. Kelly, do you have comments on the now substitute motion to continue without a traffic impact study?
I'll be very brief. Now knowing that there is street parking allowed, I mean, I was concerned before, now I'm extremely concerned. I think if the street parking were to continue and this thing were to be passed, the temptation for parents to park on the street and try to unload kids would be there if it gets stacked up. If you've ever been to a school or a daycare at 8 o'clock in the morning, it's mayhem. Doors are swinging open, backpacks, kids. It's, to me, an impact study. Public safety trumps everything else, and I just don't see any study, any kind of alterations to this plan that would make me comfortable. Given the history of this area, I know a lot of cops, I know a lot of deputies. They tell me horror stories of near misses at night all over this area, not just South Canyon, all over. It's just a miracle that more incidents don't happen. It's just a dangerous arterial road, and that's just anecdotal, but I think it's relative to the conversation right now.
Okay. Thank you. Karen, on the substitute motion?
Yes, thank you. I am in agreement with the substitute motion because I think having a traffic impact study right now is not going to change our mind when it comes right down to it. If the traffic impact study came back and said this is going to be fine, we're going to be in the same spot. I think that having somebody come, and I would encourage them to bring Mr. Kennedy, who does your site plans, and can be more clarify on what's going on. And I'm not necessarily opposed to the front yard play area because of the kids coming in, but part of that, when you come back, is to also indicate how many kids will be out at the same time, and those kinds of things, so we have a better idea what's going to happen at that location. And I think that'll help the neighbors also for those things. But there is a lot of concern with the in and out, and I think if we look at this in September, if that's the date that you want to go to, and we're still not comfortable, you can still order a traffic impact study if that's the case, but we're delaying it down the road for the applicant, and that's kind of hard to do too, I guess. But I'd even move it up closer, the end of August, but that might not be enough time to get everybody together to do a site plan. So I'll stick with the motion, and I approve it, the motion.
All right. Eric Ottenbacher, comments on the substitute motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would totally agree with Kelly's comments, and I'm almost almost saddened that the cost was brought into this, because I think that safety is the ultimate concern, and can't really put a price on on potential safety, particularly since this does tend to be a very dangerous area with high speeds, large trucks, those kind of things. And with what Kelly said, and knowing that there is off-street parking, the temptation is going to be too great for some of those parents to pull off to the side of the road and discharge their kids. Even though they would probably be supposed to drop them off in the parking lot, it's inevitable that people are going to do that. And I just think a traffic study in this area sounds like it's definitely necessary. So I would oppose the new motion in favor of the original motion. Thank you.
Haven?
Well, a couple of things maybe for the staff. I think that the parking on the street, to me, is a huge problem, and I think that should be addressed when they do come back, if that's the result of this action. And secondly, I'm a little surprised that a church was allowed in a low-density residential area. Maybe if we could address that zoning issue. And then the other, maybe, Vicki, while you're up there, just for my clarification on a conditional use permit, is that then reviewable, and how would that come up for review if we granted the conditional use permit? What's the opportunity for reviewing that permit in the future?
So, in answering your last question first, you can approve it with a review built in. Let's say you wanted to give it 6 months to see if it was working or not, and then we would bring it back forward for review with public notice. Churches primarily are in residential zoning districts. That's where we want them. It's a neighborhood use. We do have some in general commercial, but that conflicts with other commercial uses. But from a zoning perspective and a land use layout, this is where we want our churches. Parking on the street, and that's something that our traffic engineer is here today, and he can certainly be looking at that if you should choose to continue this item.
Thank you, Vicki. Vince?
Yes. My feelings about it is that the amount of money on a traffic impact study is not a concern of mine either. We're not the ones that are going to pay that. But that church wasn't raised yesterday. It's been there for years, and the incidents that have happened on that street that have caused life and pain for the neighbors is considerable, and I'm taking all of that into consideration. I think what we have to understand, though, or what I truly understand, is that this is a daycare center. It's not a bar. It's not a restaurant. It's not people who are out not concentrating on the fact that they have young ones with them, and they're very considerate of what they're doing with those. So I don't want to make too many assumptions based on the fact that the plan has been studied by the city. We have the traffic engineer that didn't have a problem with it. John brought up a good point about, well, why did we come up with the number 99? I don't know if that was a good answer, but it was the answer. It's what we have. So the consideration right now to put this off so that we can have a better idea of what the site plan is about, I think is fair as a compromise. So those were my thoughts of why I second the motion.
Thanks, Vince. So the substitute motion on the floor is to continue this item until September 10th and ask the applicant to bring back more data regarding the circulation on the site and basically a second look on the location of the playground and how they get kids into and out of the facility. I don't have any more lights up. I think we're ready to vote on the substitute motion. All those in favor of this motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Can we do a roll call, Andrea?
Sorry about the delay. Arguello? Braun?
Yes.
Bowman? Caesar?
Yes.
Gallagher? Herr? Ottenbacher? Stuck? Vidal? I must be off.
I tallied with you, Andrea. 5 yes, 4 no.
Thank you, Vicki.
That's okay.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I'm going
Yes,
to
Vicky.
encourage the applicant to hold a neighborhood meeting, maybe at the church itself, with these folks that came today. Kathy approached me during the meeting, and she's got concerns on the noise, that there's things that could be factored into that design that could help mitigate that. And it's something that needs to be considered. Limiting the number of children, staggering drop-off times, these are all things to minimize the impact on the neighborhood.
Yeah, I would echo that for the applicant. Any information on your operational plan would be helpful to the neighbors and us as well. Thank you. So we have acted on item number 3. That's continued till September 10th. We're on to item number 4. Fletcher.
Item number 4 is 20 PD 026, a major amendment to a plan development overlay to allow a microbrewery and an on-sale liquor establishment. Property located at 412 5th Street. It's the location of AB's Feed and Seed. This is used to be in a plan, or it's in a plan development because it used to be zoned general commercial district, and so as uses came in and out, they needed exceptions to parking and landscaping and setbacks. When we rezoned to urban commercial district, that happened recently, and that's kind of, other than expansion or redevelopment of the site, removes that parking and landscaping for changes in use. As you can see, property zoned urban commercial district. We have general commercial to the north and west, central business district to the south, and more urban commercial to the east. And future land use is downtown. And then we also have Main Street identified as a revitalization corridor. And here we have the major street plan, 5th Street being a principal arterial street. Site plan showing the parking which is being provided on the site, the location of the proposed microbrewery and tasting room is the east side of the building within the existing structure on that south side of the lot. They are indicating that they will have an outdoor seating area on that east side of the building when the weather is cooperating, so they'll put up a barrier and have some outdoor seating, so that's included in this, as well as a parking space that's reserved for food trucks, as they will not be serving food at this proposed microbrewery. Here we have the layout of the building. There are other uses on that west side of the building, but we have production and a bar. It would be called Woodland Republic Brewing and Blending. And they have, they'll start out with hours and employees, but they intend to, as they get more success, expand their hours and employees as that happens. Some applicant photos of the building. This is in the historic district, so they will require review of any signage, historic review of any signage or proposed changes to the exterior of the building. Elevation showing that temporary fencing around that outdoor seating area, which will be removed when they're not using it for outdoor seating. Staff photos taking a look at the site. It'll be located in the back. Looking south on 5th Street, you can see the parking garage across the street. Looking at the on the north side of the property, looking east along the train tracks. Looking north along 5th Street. City building where we are now. So looking at this, it's a unique reuse of an existing historic structure. It's the type of use we want in our downtown and in that east to Fifth corridor, bringing about that pedestrian-oriented development. And staff's recommendation is to approve with stipulations noted in the project report.
Thank you, Fletcher. Karen?
I just wanted to clarify, just from what I heard you say, the building that is in use is just going to be on the east side, not the west side. There's just that half of the building, is that correct?
Yeah, it won't be the entire building. I believe the last time we looked at an amendment for this area was a theater with on sale. So they'll be converting that. And then there's a former interior design store that was located there, and I believe there's another suite which is occupied by a real estate company. So.
Okay, thank you. That's I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Haven?
That might address my question too. The existing businesses on Fifth Street would remain, and this would be a business behind?
Yes, it'd be located in a suite behind the main businesses that are on Fifth Street. So one of those suites is vacant, and the other one, I believe, is a real estate office, and then there's another store on the north side of the property, another, can't remember what exactly the store is, but, you know, what we're excited to see is that with the urban commercial district, we should potentially get more reuse of this property, and what was previously the issue was the parking and the parking requirement, but with the urban commercial district, we can see potentially more uses going in here without parking being a major issue for development.
Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question was along those lines of parking. I was just curious, collectively, if every suite is occupied by a business, is the intent to have all of the parking contained within this area, or do they consider, off-street parking or, parking around the blocks? What was the plan for like full occupancy?
I don't know that they have plans for full occupancy. We did approve an exception for reduction in parking for the use of the building as it is, but being as this is right close to our downtown core, we're expecting that people that want to go to this place are going to figure out either on-street parking or parking in the parking garage, and it becoming a part of extending that downtown east to Fifth and connecting it with school minds and the growth of that corridor.
Eric Hikas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Fletcher, I think across on the north side is Racing Magpie, and they've got art gallery, and then there's art studios in the back of that facility. I think they use those parking spaces too. So, and I'm sure that some of those artisans from time to time would like a cold beer. So I think that's a relationship that'll work out pretty well. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
You bet. Rachel?
Well, Eric kind of beat me to it. I've been to this location, and it's it kind of reminds you of being in kind of a bigger city where you've got art stalls. So the Racing Magpie, like he said, has it's a bunch of different artist studios, and you can also purchase art there. Sometimes they have concerts in that parking lot out back. I was at one. It was a socially distant COVID concert a couple weeks ago. It was great. I really enjoyed it. And to have, a microbrewery here and food trucks and things like that. And then the parking garage is just across, Fifth Street. So I'm excited about this. I think this is definitely the kind of thing that Rapid City, is looking for, to improve getting people actually to our city. But just my comment. Thank you.
All right, no other people looking to comment right now? Questions? I'd look for a motion on item number 4. All right, Mike Goller made the motion to approve, and Vince seconded that motion. And that's per the staff recommendation, right? Okay. Any comments on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5, and on this item, Haven is going to be abstaining from this one.
Yep. Yeah, I was going to say, I involved with the Central States Fair Foundation, which supports the Central States Fair, so with that connection, I'll abstain from any comment or a vote on this application.
Thanks, Hayden. John?
Thank you. Item number 5 is a major amendment to a conditional use permit to alter and replace an existing electronic reader board sign on the east side of the Central States Fairground. The property location is located along Campbell Street between Center Street and San Francisco Street. This is an overview of the property and just showing where that's going to be located at. The existing sign is approximately right here adjacent to Campbell Street. So we're talking about the very east side of the fairground. The subject property is zoned flood hazard district and is approximately 22.43 acres in size. Future land use plan for the property identifies it as public or quasi-public in the future. And on the city's major street plan, San Francisco Street is identified as a collector street, while Campbell Street is identified as a principal arterial street. This is the photo showing the existing signage that already exists on the property. It's approximately 51 square feet of LED signage, and that LED signage would be that lower sign that you see there. That'd be a static sign above. But this is what the applicant has proposed to replace. Currently, that sign is 27 feet in height, and they will be adding approximately 1 foot to that height to accommodate for sponsorship signage as well. So this is the new signage that the applicant is proposing. Again, just noting that it's going to be the exact same square footage of LED signage for that lower sign, and then the advertising signage will be LED as well, but it is not a reader board. It's just a static sign that will be illuminated. And again, that sign will be raised approximately 1 foot to accommodate for that additional signage. On-premise signage, including electronic reader boards, are a permitted use within the flood hazard district, but because this property is part of a conditional use permit for the fairgrounds, the Planning Commission has directed staff to bring forward any application dealing with electronic reader board. The maximum allowable square footage of an electronic reader board is 60 square feet, so this will remain under that threshold. And again, it's simply replacing what is already there today. I was able to visit the site and take a few photos. This is a picture of the site looking to the north, showing the notification signage that was placed on the property. A view with a little wider perspective, again looking back to the north, noting that the sign is not close to any residential properties. It's adjacent to a commercial corridor to the east and to the rest of the fairgrounds here to the west. A view back to the south along Campbell Street. And again, a view to the east showing the auto dealership across the road. And finally back to the north again. With that, staff is recommending approval of the major amendment to the conditional use permit to update and replace the existing reader board sign with stipulations as noted in the project report. Staff to be available for questions if you have any at this time.
Thank you, John. Eric Heikus.
Point of clarification. Since Haven is abstained, does that mean I get to vote? It's kind of exciting for me.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You're up.
Okay. So then I'll make a motion to approve. And I will be voting then.
All right, sounds good. Eric Heigus made the motion to approve item number 5 with the 2 staff stipulations.
I'll second.
And Karen seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? Oh, Karen, sorry.
I just have one comment. The original sign, when it went up, it was really bright, and we called the fairgrounds and asked them to take a look at that and reduce it, and they did, and I appreciate that a lot. That made a lot of difference, and if we could get the Boys Club sign on the other side to do the same, I'd love it, but that's kind of a different thing, so thank you, though.
All right. Motion on the floor is to approve item number 5. Any more comments, questions on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Any staff items today, Vicki? planning commission
Just
items?
two things. One, I want to thank each one of you. Our item in discussion today on the Child Care Center is a difficult one, and we rely on you to have full conversations and vet the issues, and I think that each and every one of you did an extraordinarily excellent job today. So thank you for your openness and honesty and your candid discussion. We need to hear that, and that helps us when we're looking at future projects to know what your concerns are and how we should address them going forward. So thank you for that. And then secondly, I am extremely sad to tell you that this is John Green's last meeting. He will be leaving us. He has taken a position in Colorado Springs. August 21st is his last day. I can't tell you how we have enjoyed having him. He has just done an excellent job, and I was certainly hoping to keep him for years to come. So I'm sad to see him go, but I'm excited that he's got future possibilities in the great state of Colorado. So thank you, John. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, John. We really appreciated all your help at our meetings, keeping us in line, and we will miss you out here. Any planning commission items today? Oh, Vicki?
Ken, help me, September 1st, Coffee with Planners? Just a reminder that we are going to launch Coffee with Planners again, and we're taking it to the Civic Center so that we have ample room to social distance. So we've got some great topics lined up. We'll get an update on the Civic Center. Transportation staff's going to review with us some of the results of some studies that they've been doing of late. And we will also have a circle instead of table discussion on chickens. So I'm anticipating we're going to get a large turnout. Yes, and it's 3 p.m. and not 9 a.m. as our standard time. So.
Okay, September 1st, 3 p.m.
Yeah, and we'll do many public announcements between now and then.
All right. Any business from the commission? If not, I'd look for a motion to adjourn. All right, Mike Gallagher made the motion, Rachel seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?